the increase of sea level is a process. It depends on us whether we know how to deal with them or not. Well, before we start with the roundtable, and you know that there will be a roundtable after this last keynote speaker, you will be able to ask away any questions you might have had, you might have shared on that piece of paper we gave you at the beginning of the morning, and then we will give those questions. Let's now hear from Cecil Konijnendijk. I hope I didn't mispronounce your name. I will be calling you Cecil. I hope you don't mind. He's an expert, an urban forester with more than 30 years of international experience. He knows how to take care of forests in an urban setting. He has also been a consultant for more than 30 countries, and he has also been the creator of the 330-300 rule, this well-known rule about green spaces. Now, in a bit, he will be explaining what this rule is about the impact on our health, and as well as on our economies of these green spaces. He will be talking in English. Those of you who want to listen in the English language, you can just listen to him directly. If not, you can also use the devices to listen to him in Spanish. Thank you. Welcome.
Buenos días a todos. I do understand Spanish a little bit, but unfortunately I don't speak it well enough to explain some of these issues that can be rather complex. And before I go into that, a big thanks to the organizers, to the local municipality of Santa Cruz and all the other organizations standing behind. Wonderful to be here. I almost don't dare to say it, but I have been to Gran Canaria a few times, but never to Tenerife, sorry. But I'll come back, I promise. So I think we heard some wonderful examples of what we can do to deal with all the challenges that we face: climate change, biodiversity loss, public health crisis. Pedro Calata was talking about that. We also heard, and I really enjoyed John's presentation, about the need for breaking the silos and finding new ways of governing. As Einstein said, right, we have to find new solutions to new problems. The problem is the complexity can be really big. And sometimes one way to deal with that is to package the complexity in simplicity. And I think actually Carlos Moreno is a great example of that. The 15-minute city concept is so rich, you can do so many things with it, but everybody understands it. So that is a little bit of introduction to the 330-300, 300, at least I can say that in Spanish. But I'll give you a little bit of background. So first of all, my focus, my solution will be on green and on trees. And I think also going around Santa Cruz, there's obviously a really important role for trees and green space to keep the city healthy, to keep it cool, and also to keep it attractive, especially also for the people who live here and work here and play here. I will give a little bit of background on what we know today about the benefits of trees and green space. And I'm really fortunate because I can work across the world. I've worked in about 35 countries with hundreds of cities trying to green them. And it's really marvelous to see what's going on across the world. And then how do we achieve impact? And of course, there I will focus very much on this 330-300 and how we can use it. So of course, we know that the role of green space is really in focus today as we talk about things like livability and climate and also, how to look at some things like transforming cities. And I think Santa Cruz is a great example with the refinery, which of course offers a wonderful opportunity to transform and to actually, in this whole process of developing a green city, a healthy city, a resilient city, to actually have this huge project that can be a driver, can really be a stimulus for that. Also, I think, and I think this is also coming to Spain, having lived in Barcelona for a little bit, the change of the focus on private cars. Carlos was already talking about it earlier, right? The fact that we have focused so much on car habitat. I heard an architect speak one day and he said, well, actually, we've been designing our cities and building our buildings in the same way, basically, for 100 years. And it's really time that we have to start doing things differently. My city, Utrecht, in the Netherlands, every year takes away a certain small percentage of car parking, maybe 0.05%. And they give that space back to public space, to nature, to people. So, and I think that is the kind of process that we have to start applying. And of course, we can do it because we see transitions happening. Amsterdam, the capital of the Netherlands, is in what they call an energy transition. And I spoke with the guy responsible for that. They have to generate 4 times more energy, electricity, in the next few years. And that means they have to dig up every street, build big transformator houses, put in 2,600 little electricity houses, etc. So these are major transitions that we really have to work with. So one of my great inspirations is the idea, actually we heard E.O. Wilson being mentioned earlier, which is great, because the idea of kind of biophilia and embracing nature. And I think sometimes people ask me, Cecil, what is really the one thing we can do as people to change the world, to make the world a better place? Then I would say we have to re-find our place in nature, understand that we are part of nature, and actually start working with nature rather than against it. So working with cyclical processes, giving parts of the city back to nature as well, which can be a little bit scary, a little bit dangerous. And I think somebody like Stefano Mancuso, an Italian writer and academic, puts this really nicely when he talks about creating a phytopolis. And it was really good that Pedro already talked about phyto, right? So the plant city. How wonderful would that be to bring plants all over the city and to live with plants and trees? And so biophilia, I have the pleasure to work a lot with people like Timothy Beatley, who is working with biophilic cities. So this is really one way to do that. These are not, if you look at the big picture there, that's Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. The current canopy cover in Riyadh is 0.5%. Average temperatures, and I really also enjoyed the presentation this morning about heat. The city regularly gets over 50 or 60 centigrades in summer, which means that people live in air conditioning. They go from their air-conditioned house to the car, to the shopping mall, to the school. Can we not do something different? So now they have this huge project where actually they're going to increase the canopy cover to 9%. They're going to create 440 new parks. They're going to green the mosques. They're going to green the buildings, a lot of green walls and green roofs. And that shows the kind of ambition and drive that cities are actually using. And I think Singapore on the top there, of course, has been a great inspiration for many. One of the greenest cities in the world, but also a very densely built city. And thereby political motivations and very clear strategies, but basically every decision in the city has to have a nature component. You see what the result can be. So, of course, also in Spain, there's a lot of good innovations and brave politicians. And I know greening sometimes becomes a political issue. I don't think it should be, right? Because actually when we talk about health, we talk about resilience, these are topics that should really not matter what kind of political color you are doing. And we know, of course, also the superblocks in Barcelona became highly political. But the fact is that actually first studies show that people in Barcelona are already starting to sleep better, air pollution levels are down. The original opposition, a lot of people said, well, we don't want these superblocks, we don't want them to come because then you cannot park in front of the shops or the cafes. Now, most people in Barcelona think this was a great idea as trees and space are given back. In my own city of Utrecht, this is wonderful, right? This is a canal with a beautiful park. This used to be, until a few years ago, a highway. So it has been given back to water, to nature, and we know this, of course, also from other cities. So great examples. A lot of initiatives these days, and cities also pick it up as a bit of a competition. Who can be the greenest, right? Who can be the healthiest? Who can score highest on the different rankings? Maybe that's not so important, but maybe Santa Cruz can start being part of that discussion as well. Making the case, of course, always politicians ask, why do we need trees and green space? An important question is always like, how much is going to cost? And what are going to be the benefits in economic terms? So, of course, we've already seen the Sustainable Development Goals and the fact that, inner city nature and trees, they play a really important role for climate, for health, but also for things like economic development. People that are shopping in green areas with a lot of trees, they stay longer, and they also spend more money, according to some American studies. So that's not so strange that actually a lot of the shop owners in Barcelona today are pretty happy with those super blocks with the new green, because actually people are spending more money with them. So a lot of good reasons. We did some work for the Flemish government in Belgium, and they asked us, can you look at all the research on the relation between nature and human health? And can you then give us some good recommendations, what we can do in Flemish cities to improve health through nature? Well, actually, there are 4 interventions that turn out to be the best ways to improve people's health. Increasing the canopy cover. Even if you do 1 or 2%, it's already very good. Creating a lot of small parks, pocket parks, that bring nature and green places to every neighborhood. Creating community gardens where people can garden together and meet each other, which is really important in changing cities where we have a lot of newcomers, etc. And maybe the most important, which is also a big topic I know in places like Barcelona, greening our school environments. Right now, we're at the end of a trend when we have been taking away all the green from schools because we think it's messy, it's dangerous, people don't want to take care of it. But studies in Barcelona show that people in green schools, children in green schools, can learn up to 50% or so better than kids who are not in green schools. So this is really, for me, a no-brainer. We have to green our schools, our hospitals, and to do these things here as well. One of the most powerful studies I've seen during recent years on the importance of green is this work, also coming from Spain, IS Global in Barcelona. They found that if you can reach 30% tree canopy cover, you can cool the city so much that during heat waves, you can save up to one third of the people who die prematurely during heat waves. That is pretty intense, right? If you think in 2003 in Europe, we had a big heat wave. Between 70,000 and 100,000 people died prematurely. So out of those people, we could have saved up to maybe 40,000 lives. We could have prolonged people's lives if only our cities would have been greener. And of course, the trend on the other hand is that cities are getting less green. We're seeing the densification, competition for space. So it's very difficult sometimes. There's also some really good studies now on the economic benefit of green space. So one is Central Park in New York. They did a really good study on impacts like what does it mean for hotel, for restaurant, businesses. It would be great to do a study like that here in Santa Cruz, right? What is the impact of some of your parks, of the Pametum, for example, right, on economic activities? How many visitors are coming? How many people are staying? Of course, also healthcare costs. And really, one of the nice studies I saw recently comes out of California in the US that showed that people who live in green neighborhoods spend $374 per year less on healthcare expenses. And this was a study they did for millions of Californians. And I'm sure this is still an underestimation. So actually investing in green is a public health service. It's not just a nice thing. It's going to save us money. It's going to be a very good economic investment. So we did some work for FAO. I have worked a little bit with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN. And we made this guidebook for valorization of nature-based solutions. It's freely available. You can scan the code. And it takes you step by step to making a business case. So not just, a policy case or saying, hey, green is good, but actually an actual business case for nature-based solutions and green interventions. And I think we need to move towards that. As we enter political arenas, as we break those silos, we have to really start having good argumentation in place as well. So, and we use something in this, which is called the Nature-Based Solutions Business Model Canvas, which you go step by step to making a business case. It's very similar to any business school teaching students how to make a business case for a product or a service. We can do the same for green spaces. This is wonderful, but my heart goes out to some of the other benefits of green, I would say. So it's really good that we have these tools, but I think we really have to think about guidelines, things that appeal to people, to start new conversations. I was really happy to hear the talks because actually a lot of the topics I'm mentioning were already reiterated here and there. And of course it started with the idea of proximity, Carlos. If people want to benefit from trees and nature, they have to have them close by. Otherwise, they're not going to get those benefits. And that also includes visibility. If we remember the COVID pandemic, I was also locked down in an apartment in Barcelona for a while. I could see my street trees, I could see my streets in the courtyard. That helped me stay healthy. And some initial studies show that actually people who could see green during the pandemic were healthier and had less mental health problems. Then connectivity, we also heard several times. Connecting green space, but also connecting people and nature is really essential. Diversity, the diversity of green experiences, from a social park to a nature area to some of those wonderful coastal areas that we saw earlier Miriam present. And finally, a big topic today, and luckily I can mention it here, but when I go to the United States, where I come often, I have to be careful with this these days, equity. So equity means that everybody has a right to nature. So nature is a human right, right? Everybody should have fair access. We heard that already earlier too as well. Tree equity is a term that used to work with that. So this is the 330-300. And I said already, right, it's a very simple concept, 3 numbers. Any culture in the world can relate to 3 numbers. But it packages a lot, right? It says, well, we need visible nature. So 3 mature trees should be in sight for every home, every place where you work, every school, but also every hospital. Everybody should be able to see 3 large trees. 30% canopy cover at each neighborhood level. Some studies are showing that very clearly. We saw the one from Barcelona. Other studies show if you reach about 30%, you see people improve in terms of mental health, cardiovascular health, people sleep better. The birth weight of children who get born in greener neighborhoods is higher, which means later in life they're probably going to be healthier as well. And finally, and this is in line with the World Health Organization, everybody should have a good quality green space, public green space, within 300 meters. And that's about a 5-minute walk, depending on how mobile you are. So you can already hear the rhythm, right? 330-300. It was actually a February day during the COVID, the 3rd wave, I think. I was in Barcelona having a nice glass of red wine in my kitchen. And then suddenly it struck me. 330-300 became a nice rhythm. I posted it on social media and, well, I thought, okay, maybe somebody will pick up the idea. The next day, 8 o'clock in the morning, somebody called me out of my bed and said, can we post this? Because this is a great idea. And within 4 years now, hundreds, if not thousands of cities across the world are using it, which is really showing that this kind of simplicity that packaged a lot of complexity, that is based on research and evidence, was really in high demand. In the Netherlands, 75% of all cities and municipalities is now using 330-300 for its climate strategies, for its green plans, sometimes even for its city master plans. So yeah, lots of developments. And once again, right, it's about visible green, the mental health component. It's about climate green, which is to do with cooling, meeting places, and it's the recreational green. So for those of us who are a little bit older, you can say VCR, right, like the video recorder. Visual, climate, recreational, 3 components. And sometimes when trees are hard to plant, you can also think, well, what can I do for these 3 components with other types of green? Maybe with climbing plants, or with pergolas, or with green roofs, right? You can do some of the same things, but it's very hard, very difficult to beat trees when it comes to things like cooling and health benefits. So I published a lot in my life, many articles, but I always joke that the highlight for me was when I made it to the French Cosmopolitan. So they were talking about this formula, magic tree formula, can make you happy in 24 hours. I'm not sure about the 24 hours, but maybe a little bit longer. So yeah, this is a very complex slide, but just to show that there's a lot of work going on really trying to understand why is it that nature is good for our health. And there's some pathways. This is some work done by Terry Hartig in Sweden, and I try to kind of work with them for the 330 and the 300. It's about reducing harm, right? Trying to reduce pollution, heat. It's about restoring capacities. So it's about making us stronger. It's about making us mentally better, to restore our mental capacity as well. I think some of the exercises we've been doing are, of course, also about that. But then, of course, sometimes nature can be a little bit dangerous, right? We can have allergies, or we can have ticks that bring pests and diseases. So we have to manage those elements as well. But there's really a lot of research these days, and Pedro already said a lot about that as well. Yeah, just some examples of cities, organizations that are now using the 330-300 as an inspiration. Sometimes they make their own versions of it. You already see some Spanish cities here. So actually, funny enough, Spain was one of the first countries that started saying that, hey, this sounds great, let's maybe work with that. And I have to give credit to the town of Viladecans especially, because a few years back they actually had a special decoration made on October 4th, which is actually my birthday, funny enough, the decoration of Viladecans, and they actually said, well, let's try to promote this across Spain at the municipal level, provincial level, to make cities greener and to promote biodiversity. So really nice to see that Spain is leading the charge in this respect. Yeah, and of course also, I mean, the media love this, right? They love to see the benchmark and to measure how different cities are doing. So recently they did a study for 8 of the world's big cities. Some people say more than 100 million, maybe even 200 million people saw the news story. But it shows, for example, here, some of the big winners, right? A place like Singapore, they score high on the 3 dimensions, which is great and maybe not so surprising. But then if you look at my capital of Amsterdam, on the 30%, 0 score. So nobody in Amsterdam lives in a neighborhood with 30% canopy. And the city is getting hotter, I can promise you. New York City is interesting. 92% of the people can see 3 large trees, but only 1% of the people has 30% canopy cover. So it has to do with design, right? It has to be about being clever in combining trees and green spaces in our city. But of course, this really stimulates people because New York wants to have 30% canopy. That's the target they have set. So yeah, it will be interesting to see what Santa Cruz could do on that front as well. One other city that has been doing a lot recently is the city of Nice. And I thought that's maybe also a nice inspiration, right? The mayor said, let's do 330-300. And he put this whole organization at work and said, well, what is our current score, right? How are we doing? Well, not so bad, but we can improve. And then they made a really detailed plan. So they actually said, well, what are the steps we can take to make sure that everybody, 100% of the people in Nice, has access? So planting new trees, putting new parks in place. And for me, that's the most rewarding. I can make nice ideas and I can give a lot of talks. But when I hear that actually new trees are planted, new parks are created. I had a call from a group in Australia, a group of citizens, and they said, Cecil, we've been working for 10 years to get a new park, and our politicians don't want to listen. But then we said, hey, there's a 330-300, this is an international benchmark, and all of a sudden they listened and they promised us a new park. So even citizens can take it up, which I think is really great. It becomes a citizen engagement tool. So if you do the 330-300 analysis, you'll often see dark red areas on your map. That's often, for example, historical neighborhoods, port areas, harbors, but also business and industrial parks. And this is really problematic because people are here working long days. They should see some green, right, to stay healthy and creative. They should also be able to make a little walk during their lunch break. So this is a project in the Netherlands we call Working Landscape of the Future, where we try to green those neighborhoods, those industrial and business parks as well. So yeah, some key lessons, and I promised I would stay in time because I realized this is a very long morning. But really packaging complexity and simplicity is not necessarily a bad thing. It actually helps start the conversations. Some of the best reactions I've had is from planners, from architects, from politicians, from citizens. While some of my green colleagues have been pushing back and said, Cecil, this is too simple. 330-300 is too simple. I said, right, start to open the door with it, and then you can talk about what is really needed. How do you work with different tree species, different types of green spaces? The good thing is there's quite some good evidence, especially for the 30 and the 300. For the 3, of course, you can say, well, is it 3 trees, 4 trees, 5 trees, 2 trees? There was actually a study done by Clemson University in the US that showed that if you can see 3 trees or more, you're in a significantly better mental health. We also did a study in the Netherlands, or other people do, because I try not to do those studies, a national study that showed that people who live in a 330-300 neighborhood are actually physically healthier and also have less overweight, even if you control for things like income, cultural background, etc. So yeah, we need nearby, visible, diverse, and well-connected green spaces. Another simple message. And Carlos and I already had a little talk this morning briefly. There's a really nice connection between the 15-minute neighborhood and the 330-300, which kind of brings biophilic elements into it. And we're working now with the city of Fort Collins in Colorado, who have 15-minute city as a concept, to see how 330-300 can support the implementation. I think guidelines and metrics are good, and I think Pedro already made a very strong element for it. But of course, they should never be used in isolation. It's an inspiration. Politicians like it. I saw the mayor of Santa Cruz this morning was really saying that, hey, actually, I like this little metric, and I think he mentioned it also to the press. Large trees are really important. So if you can have some big trees, they can give many, many, many more benefits than a lot of small trees. So some of those big ficus trees, for example, here in Santa Cruz, they give a lot of value in terms of cooling, in terms of ecological values, etc. Integrate with different agendas. I think John already gave a really great talk about that, so I don't have to say so much. And really, the one thing I want to also tell you, don't get stuck in limitations or buts or no's, it cannot be done. Because if you look back at our cities 50 years ago, we've seen some great examples today, they looked very, very different. And 50 years from now, cities are going to look very different as well. So this is my challenge to you. Are we going to drive those changes? Are we going to steer and guide them from a green biophilic perspective? Or are we just going to let it happen? I hope that we will steer and guide it. So I'll leave you with an image by David Hockney, the British artist. And I know already, I hope I still can live for a few more years, but on my gravestone it will say, "Here lies Mr. 330-300. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you. Thank you.
La verdad que las personas tenemos las ideas en los sitios más insospechados. En Barcelona,
Wow.
30, 300. Y viene bien hasta para
Lovely
el
to see
sobrepeso,
that in
¿viste?
Barcelona, 330, 300, they're
Increíble.
putting this idea
Dabas un
in
dato,
place, and it
$374
makes you lose weight. That's
de
great.
ahorro en
And
cuidados
we're
médicos con esa
saving
regla del
over
330, 300 que podrían
$300
ser,
in
decía
medical
Cecil,
expenses if we
muchos más. Al alcalde de
invest
Santa
in
Cruz
this
de Tenerife le gustaba
330,
la métrica que ha
300
dicho. A los ciudadanos también vamos a
rule.
ver
As he
si
said, the
es
mayor of
verdad que
Santa Cruz is a
que la
fan,
consigue implantar. 3 árboles
and
visibles desde cada
hopefully
hogar,
we will be able
escuela
to
o puesto de
implement
trabajo,
it.
30% de
3
cobertura
trees
arbórea
in view,
y 300
30%
metros de
of
distancia
canopy
máxima
cover, and 300
desde
meters
donde estamos
maximum
hasta el
distance
espacio
to
verdadero cercano.
a
Cecil, ha sido un auténtico
green
placer tenerte
space.
aquí.
It's been a
Enseguida
real
vamos a
pleasure
poder
to
ir en
have you
la
here
mesa redonda.
with
Tú
us.
tienes esa vista
We
desde
will
el puesto
have
de
our
trabajo.
round table
Ojalá.
discussion
Tres
now.
árboles.
Ojalá,
Do you
ojalá.
see
Estaba
3
escuchando y decía,
trees
qué
from
maravilla,
your
¿no?
apartment?
Pero
Oh,
yo sé
I
ese
wish. It
porcentaje que no.
sounds wonderful.